welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore. We are welcoming Michael Murphy, or Mike Murphy, from Let's Ketchup to Kankakee Podcast. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's so great to finally have you on the show, and I feel like some people have heard your name, or Let's Ketchup, both obviously hand in hand, for the last 2 years now.
Yeah.
It's officially been 2 years at this point. You guys celebrated 2 years in what, this past June, I think? Or was it right?
2
this
years,
past summer?
Like November 22nd was technically when we were incorporated in the state of Illinois.
Oh, really? So it really wasn't that far from, because we're recording this December 3rd. So...
And then we got our 501c3, and that's when we really launched, though, in January of 23. So it'll technically, like our 501c3, it would be this January, be like 2 years when we actually started. Yeah. You know. Right.
It's hard to be able to do what you were meant to do without the 501c3.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we were thinking, we were like, we started, doing the prep stuff, but I would say we really like launched in January of 23. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to talk and just learn about you and to learn about Let's Catch Up some more beyond what, the Daily Journal has done excellent coverage on Let's Catch Up, which is great because you guys are doing some awesome things. But I first learned a little bit more about you beyond the Journal when you were on the I'm Fine podcast. Shout out to Eric and Brad. Check that podcast out when you get the chance. Either the one with Mike or any of the other episodes is great. Obviously, the one with you, I was very intrigued by, because you have quite an interesting background. Sitting here with you now, you just seem to be like the coolest, calmest dude. Get along with anyone, go with the flow. But when you started talking about like your childhood and things like that on the I'm Fine podcast, I'm like, I did not expect that. This guy has seen some stuff. He's been through some serious stuff. So some people might be able to tell that you're not a native just actually by the sound of your voice. And I don't mean to bring that out in a bad way, because I love the tone of your voice. I do. I love it. And you can tell, at least I could tell. I was like, this guy is from the East Coast somewhere. He's from the East Coast somewhere. I'm not really sure where. Yeah. But so let's start there. Where are you from originally?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Queens, New York. To really great parents. I love my parents. Shout out to my parents. And when I had a pretty normal childhood, except when I would say it probably started when I was 11 or 12. I had some stuff I was going through. There was some mental health stuff, depression, and there's probably some other diagnoses that were there as well.
Well, what brought all that on? At that, and by the way, like, you're in good company, because I had the same problem around that age too. Yeah. Like you're starting between like 8 and 9. I think it was, my dad got laid off, and there was just a lot, and my mom started a new job. So we were living in Queens still, and my mom was like in the North Jersey. She was a wholesaler mutual fund. She was in the financial industry. Yeah. And she had this new territory that was 2 hours away in like North Jersey. So she had moved, and it was a really great opportunity for her. And she is like the best saleswoman ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mom, all my friends love my mom. She's the most charismatic person ever. So it was a really great opportunity. And it just was like a mixture of kind of bad circumstances. There was some downsizing where my dad was working. So he was kind of looking for a new job. And I think that hit him. And then my mom got this new territory, which is this awesome opportunity for her. To not only honestly make more money given that situation, but also to just kind of expand her career in an industry that wasn't really easy for women to be in. And she just gosh, especially at that time, because I'm assuming this is like the 1970s or 80s or 80s.
Well, no, this was
90s?
So this was.
I'm not trying to date you, by the way.
No, this was 90s. So this was like it's coming up on. I think it all kind of hit like in the mid to late 90s, and then
Well, and which still in the 90s, man, so much sexism still, and all that stuff going on.
Just hearing my mom talk about it, I'm just like, whoa, we've made maybe we're not perfect as a society, but we definitely made progress. I mean, she told me a story one time. She was in an interview. And this is when she was up and coming, like on Wall Street. And in the interview, they're getting done. He goes, okay, now turn around. I swear.
What is this, a movie?
I'm not lying. And so you don't believe that stuff until your mom's like, yeah, they told me to do it. My mom just walked out because she's a gangster. So you don't mess with my mom.
Yeah. Well, obviously she'd have to be a tough cookie, like you said, especially in that industry.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen the Wolf of Wall Street.
I mean, if you talk to my mom and, and she fought for respect and at the end, everyone, there was guys that were coming into the industry or had been in there way less than she had, maybe. She had 42 years in the industry before she retired. And there were guys that she'd known for 20 years. So they were like way later than her that were thanking her for making it easier for their daughters to make it into the industry because she was one of a very few in that industry. And so she's a tough cookie. And she comes from a tough family. I mean, she comes from a real working class family in Queens. My grandpa fought. Class, my grandpa fought in the Battle of the Bulge. My grandma was a nurse. And they struggled because of that, because of the PTSD. And so my mom grew up in a tough situation, loving family, good family, but it was still just tough, just in general in terms of, resources and stuff like that. And then she just, had a lot of grit and was highly successful in her industry. And so
when she got that job 2 hours away from Queens, you guys didn't go with her? Is that what you're telling me?
She commuted.
Oh my gosh.
She's the hardest working person in the world. But yeah, so just to kind of go back to that.
No wonder why you started having, issues.
It was, it was a mixture of, I think my dad was struggling and just the family in general. It was like my mom was commuting a lot and that's stressful in and of itself, new job. My dad was, going on interviews, but that's still tough for anybody in between jobs, And I just think that there was just a lot of pressure. That's when I started excelling at being a knucklehead. And
because you had the time, right? You must have had a lot of time to yourself at that point.
Yeah, like we were like latchkey kids, and we had a lot of, you walked home from school every day and, my parents, we were in Queens, but everyone knew each other still. Okay. Even in it was Middle Village, Queens, but everyone. So I wasn't good at getting away with stuff. Our neighbors would tell my parents cared. I wasn't like, this super intelligent knucklehead. I got caught all the time. I got kicked out of 2 schools.
What did you do, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I was just,
were they like private schools?
They were like a lot of in New York City. A lot of people go to Catholic schools.
Oh yes, they do.
So and our family's Irish Catholic. So
okay,
that's my dad paid for his own Catholic high school. You know what I'm saying? When he went to high school, he paid for his own.
What?
That's just what you did, and he wanted to go.
I can't imagine having to pay for my own high school because I went to Bishop McNamara.
Okay.
So, man, I can't imagine having to pay for that.
Yeah, my dad did, and I think it was more of like him telling his parents that they would have, but you know what I'm saying? But it was like, I'm doing this. I want to go to the one that I want to go to. And so, so it was,
what did you do though? What did you do to get kicked out?
I was getting in a lot of fights. I was stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Like even you could still get in fights in school back then and not get kicked out directly. But I was getting in a lot of fights and it just wasn't working out. I was constantly in detentions and getting suspended. And so then they sent me to this Catholic school that had like kind of like a pseudo back then special education program for kids that had some behavioral issues. And then I found a way to get booted from that one too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Just a real winner as a kid, so yeah.
So what happened at that point? Did you end up finishing high school or?
So that's when my parents, and this is why I'm, I give my parents a lot of credit. They were going through a lot and I definitely didn't make it easy on them. And they just realized that I needed more help than what could be, provided. Because I was hanging out with the wrong people and I was getting in with the wrong crowd and a lot of older people. And so not just in school, but out of school doing some knucklehead stuff.
Yeah, not like gangs.
I pretended like I was a tough guy, but there was a lot of gangs in my neighborhood, and not in my neighborhood. I lived in a decent middle class neighborhood. I don't want to say like I was from the projects or anything, but there was, Latin Kings, Bloods, Crips, a lot of Bloods, a lot of Latin Kings, and where at least in my area of New York City, or like the adjacent, towns and, those kinds of things. So there was some of that. And I, knew a lot of those guys, but just kind of hanging out and being friends with dudes like that, or just knowing dudes like that and being kind of rolling with those crowds a little bit, doesn't lend itself to making good choices.
No.
You're always trying to be like cool and tough and, and that it never ends well. So my parents kind of realized that they had sent me to this school that was supposed to help me. And those people were great. I mean, I was just highly depressed. I mean, they would give me a test. I would sign my name and give it back and fall back asleep. I was just like, that's
just
where
did not care.
Yeah. I was just in a spot where I look, when you think about depression, you're like, I'm not motivated. None of this is motivating to me, and I don't want to do any of it. And I was, a Murphy family trait is stubbornness, and I was pretty stubborn. And,
you don't say.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's good and bad, but in this situation, it wasn't great. And so that I just kind of was bucking the system. My parents realized, hey, we need to, we need to provide more resources or get Mike in a situation where, he can get the help that he needs. And they sent me to this super like Nazarene Christian boys home in the backwoods of Vermont on a farm. And and that wasn't the first, the military school was the first option. And
I was going to say, because didn't you, if I remember from the I'm Fine podcast, didn't you end up going to military school?
No, I went to the boys home. You have to interview to go into military school.
Okay.
So I don't remember this. My mom tells me this story. So if this is my mom's version, I remember my mom being mad at me after the interview. I don't remember this, but I remember in one of the interviews, I found out that you have to want to come. So I was just like,
for the military
school. So there's like whatever the guy that's running the thing, and you have an interview. And
it's funny because I feel like that contradicts what our parents always threatened us with.
Yeah.
They were just going to throw us in there.
Yeah. This is where I was like, I wasn't always clever, but I was clever. But like this to show how much of an idiot I was. My mom said I put my feet up on his desk. And I said, I don't want to come here. And, he did not take that disrespect lightly, and he didn't like it. I didn't physically.
He's like, we're not taking this guy.
Pretty much. And then my mom had some words with me after we left the building.
Knew exactly which buttons to press and when to do it.
And my parents were trying so hard. They really were. I was just like, I wasn't hearing it because I just was in a bad space.
Yeah.
So after, I think, a couple of those interviews, my parents were like, all right, well, this is a dire situation. And if we want, to get me the help that I needed, they had to kind of create a scenario where I didn't know that I was going to a place. So there was this, this is how I heard about Olivet and all this stuff, just to kind of connect it a little bit later. But there's a place called Fields of Harvest in Vermont, and it was a farm. It was on a 10-acre farm, horses, chickens, cows. So not New York City.
No.
And so they told me we were going on a ski trip, and, we pulled up to this house, and I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do like a quick interview with the school.
And I'm curious, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I got a sister.
So did she come with to make it really like, hey, this is a vacation.
So
this is a ski trip.
In New York, I think this was like still during the school year, because I got kicked out of my school before the end of the school year.
Okay. So
this is my parents. I think it was part of the, like if he has one more straw, but then they kind of had these plans in the background. So, so I got kicked out of the second school, and then my sister was still in high school, and she traveled to Manhattan every day to go to high school in Manhattan. So I don't think she could. She still had school.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. My parents, we drive up, and I'm like, cool, this will be fun. And, we get into the office, and I think they had told me on the way up they were going to visit a school. It wasn't just completely blindsided.
Okay.
But we were just visiting.
Yeah.
And so we're walking through, and this guy named Neil Kidney, he's one of the best dudes I've ever known. Like, just love that guy. He's recently passed, but just such a good guy. And we're walking through, and he's like, here's your room. And so my brain's going, what is it? Is he talking about the future here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And we get down to the office, and Neil didn't know. They didn't tell me I was staying that day.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So we're getting,
what a way to find out.
Yeah. But Neil was he was an 82nd Airborne guy, and he was a contractor his whole life. He was a tough dude, but very quiet, calm. He had his own past, which is why he was doing what he was doing. So he was unfazed by my temper tantrum in the office.
Yeah.
Because
he had seen it before.
100 million times. Yeah. So I had this temper tantrum, and my mom and dad are mortified because they're just embarrassed because I'm being an idiot in public. And Neil just kind of looks at me, goes, and he would always be like, "Okay, bud." That's how he would talk.
Okay, bud.
Okay, bud. And he'd be like, "Are you done?" And I'd be like, "Who is this human being?" Like, you know what I'm saying? Just like,
you done now?
Yeah. So I had this whole tirade with not the, best words, and this guy unfazed and, just kind of just like from the start was like, that doesn't get you any. It wasn't like anger, or he wasn't mad at you or like yelled at. It was just like, that's not going to get you anywhere here. And it was very calm. And there was a very like...
and had you experienced that before? Usually, was it always a reactive response that you would get instead of just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like any normal parent would be like, you can't say that to me. You know what I'm saying? Like some of the stuff I would do, it's like, I would react in the same exact way. Mm-hmm. My parents were like normal, and Neil was just this like, he was an algorithm. It was if you do this, then this happens. Mm-hmm. And so they had this thing called the wood pile out there. And they had cords and cords of wood because they heated the house with wood. Okay, I was going to say, did they have like a I don't know, like an outdoor furnace, an outdoor furnace, yes. And you could fit. I mean, So, and then they had like 3 indoor furnaces. That just went. That was a way to keep the bills down and keep the house warm.
Yeah, my uncle used to do that.
Yeah. And so he had cords and cords of wood because what would happen is there was a local lumber mill that would donate all of their their knotted wood that they couldn't use. And so he would have a guy come in and chainsaw it. And then we would have at the end of the summer, we would have 3 or 4 weekends where it was just nonstop. We had the hydraulic splitters and mauls going, and we would just split all the wood and then stack it. We had this huge cellar where it was like you could probably fit cords of wood down there. I don't know exactly how much, but a lot of wood. And that's where the original wood pile stood, where you got punished.
Oh gosh.
And so, and it was like, if you had...
What was the punishment for being punished by the wood pile?
So you would, let's say you cussed, right? They wouldn't allow cussing. And I was a sailor. So
you spent a lot of time at that wood pile.
My first year was living in the cellar, just moving wood. And so
was that the punishment, moving wood?
They would say you have 200 logs, right? And they were split. So it wasn't like full logs, but it was like 200 split logs. You carried it from one spot to the other. They'd come out and count it. And they'd be like, "Oh, you're 20 short," because you'd always try and, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And Neil's son, Micah, was always like, "Man, you're 20 short, dude. Go get the 20." You know what I'm saying? Like, they weren't mad. They weren't like yell at you. It was just like, this is what you did the thing, and this is what happens.
Yeah.
And then you just move it back when you're done. And you had to do your whole school day, your chores. And then after your chores, you'd have to go move wood. And then when you're done moving wood, you could eat dinner. So it was very no one was mad. No one yelled. It was just, this is what it is. And I spent my first year there doing the wood pile. And the wood pile I remember one time, this is just a funny story. We had cows, and they had the electric fence. So you'd move it to maybe 10 feet before the electric fence, out the cellar door. And there was just the cow. The cow's name was Naomi, and it was just chilling, eating grass.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never wanted to be more. I never wanted to be a cow more in my life than right now, because he's just chilling out there. Yeah. I'm just moving ridiculous amounts.
You were getting so tired of.
Yeah, I was like, it worked, man. That place, their consistency, and then their just general. They genuinely loved you. They gave you hugs, and they told you they loved you, and they, it was very straightforward, and they were.
What made it work for you there? How did that change you versus the other?
I just feel and I've worked in mental health and special education myself when I left college. So, kind of hindsighting it, you know what I'm saying? It was just the consistency. It was here's this ridiculous structure. You wake up in the morning, you do your chores, you eat breakfast, you go to school, you do your chores, you eat dinner. And then if you have some extra time, you can play some board games or, hang out. And we had 10 acres. You can go outside and have fun. But it was very regimented and it was very structured, and it wasn't in any way like abusive or anything like that. It was just a bunch of, a lot of the people were ex-military or construction worker guys that, had made mistakes in their past, and they built Neil built the boys' home with his bare hands. He had this whole huge dormitory. At the peak, it had like 20 boys in it. And he built this with his own hands, trying to make a difference. Because he felt, he was previously a Nazarene pastor, so he felt that was God's calling on his life, and he took it very seriously. And he wasn't like a Bible thumper or anything like that. It was just, he's a very mild dude and just wanted to make a difference and did. Because there's a lot of dudes that I'm still really good friends with on Facebook that, there was a few dudes that were, Crips and in gangs and different things, on drugs, and now they're not, and they have families and they're doing really well, and they're like really constructive, good humans. And that goes back to Neil. Like that dude is. And, for me,
so is that place still running even though he's deceased?
No, he moved on. He got old, and then it just became one of those things where they sold the place to another organization. Okay. I forget the name of it, but that was kind of in a similar, I think it was like a drug rehab kind of a thing. Oh, okay. So it got moved into Neil was like, I think, intentional about that, wanting to move it on to someone that would kind of still do good things. I think he gave him a deal, that kind of a thing. But yeah, so that's that story. But yeah, I would say Neil and Micah and all those people out there, and the church we went to, those people were really good to me. I still am like friends with them a lot, friends with the older ladies in the church, and they still, kind of root for me, and that's super cool. That's awesome. So I think it was a full court press, because I think that was the only thing that would have worked. And I had no other options but to kind of operate in this kind of safe environment and learn how to manage myself. And then, that consistency and enough time kind of changed the way I looked at the world and what I wanted to do.
How long were you there?
4 years, pretty much my whole high school.
Okay. Yeah, so this was the beginning of high school for you.
So I was 8th grade. I was almost 14. So I finished 8th grade there and then went pretty much all through high school there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get out, you finish up, you're a new man, right? Yeah. What do you do then? What do you do with this newfound person that you've discovered?
Yeah, so I didn't want to go to college because I was still young and ignorant, and my parents were like, I really think you should go to college. And so eventually, their reason won out, and I ended up going to college, and I didn't really know where I wanted to go. So it was a Nazarene Compassionate Ministry, and our chaplain's son was going to Olivet. And so I was like, okay, at least I'll know somebody, and, just give this a try, and maybe for a year or whatever, and just kind of see where things go. Because we lived in a boys' home, man. I was, I wouldn't say feral, but we were pretty wild, in a good way, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, you're out there in the woods.
It was a bunch of it was a bunch of knuckleheads, and we wrestled and fought in like, not like a violent way, but like, rough house and stuff like that. And so, having Paul Adams, who was the chaplain's son, I know him for years, a really good dude, still one of my best friends. Going out there with me, I felt like was a little bit of a safety blanket for my, for being a little bit of a wild child.
Give you a little bit of, a safety blanket to make that step.
To assimilate, I'm just kidding. No, it wasn't like that, but there was a little bit of that. I mean, there was, the stuff we would do was just like, this is, we were a little wild. So, pranks and different things like that. And he was like, you have to learn to be a little more chill. And
right. Because, going to a Nazarene university is a little different than, being on a farm where it's like you're expected to be wild to a certain degree.
And just have fun and do whatever as long as you got all your stuff done. And so, that was a learning experience. But that was like kind of how I got to Olivet. And I was very interested in theology and philosophy. So I became a philosophy major. I'm a little bit of a nerd at heart.
Okay.
So
nerds are welcome here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good. Okay. Awesome.
You're in the right place.
Yes. So I became a philosophy major, and that's the kind of where I went to Olivet. And I honestly, I know people have mixed opinions about Olivet, but And I know, some of the stuff, I understand where people come from, but I had some of the best profs, people that really looked out for you. I can go into, I think state universities obviously afford a lot of things, but at least when I was there, one of the philosophy profs, Dr. Lowry, had office hours, and he's a PhD from Notre Dame, and I can just go sit down with him and talk to him for an hour about what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
It's like that access was really cool, or, the other profs, and you could just go in there and be like, and you don't know anything, and they're just being nice to you and trying to help guide you. So that was a really cool, I learned a lot because of the relationships I had, with my friends and that were cohorts, and then also with the profs. So yeah, that was a good experience overall for sure.
So you end up staying here after that, right? So
I graduate college, and then if you want to pursue a career in philosophy, you either have to go on and get a graduate degree, or and even if you get a graduate degree after that, then it's like, do you want to,
and what are the jobs are for someone in philosophy?
Yeah.
Right?
So
except for like teaching.
Exactly. You get a PhD and then you can get like a teacher, you could become a professor, or you can not make great money reviewing books for an editor. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that. Like, there's really not much that I think the one thing it helps with is just kind of critical thinking and understanding that there's a lot of ways to look at the world. So that was cool. But, I also had to pay rent. And so, and this is where like giving back was really important to me, like because of my experience.
Because at this point you had kind of come full circle.
Yes. And so like the whole idea of paying it forward and because Neil was always in debt. He would let boys come there. If they couldn't pay, he would figure it out. And the ones that did, he tried to subsidize, and he also worked full time for a church building company. So he was traveling. So he was like propping this thing up like with sheer willpower, and not making people pay that couldn't, or if they missed a couple payments, you weren't getting the boot. He wasn't going to do that. So he was a real good. So that idea of like paying it forward and it not being about, just doing the right thing and trying to help people was huge for me. So then I thought, I was a bit of a knucklehead, and I had a couple buddies working at Indian Oaks, and I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to kind of jump into kind of a similar field, and that, where I came from, is kind of a residential.
And for those that aren't familiar with Indian Oaks, how do you usually explain it to people?
Yeah, it's
because I know not everyone's familiar with Indian Oaks. I am, but
yeah, it's a tier 1 residential facility for juvenile sex offenders, and not just that, but like from behavioral and it's if you I think the way it goes is like you start in like foster, like ward of the state foster care, and then like a group home, and then it would be like a residential when there's a lot of struggles that are going on. So a lot of kids that went there, I was on P1, struggle with a lot of things. And so, I just thought that was a cool, for me, it was something I can do to pay it forward. And I have this experience with my own life that maybe I can help somebody else out. And so I worked there for about 2 years, met some of the coolest people. I'm still really good friends, 2 of my best friends I work there with, I still talk to all the time.
Yeah. What are some of the situations you encountered there? I can't imagine some of the stories that came across your desk.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk about all of them, but there was just definitely a lot of, it's sad stuff, man. I don't want to, be overly depressing, but some of the stories that these kids had were just like outrage. Like it makes sense that you're struggling at the level that you're struggling. Yeah. Like no one cared about you in your life ever. And contrasted to my life, like I had all these people caring for me and all these people rooting for me. And so it's like you do get even looking back, it's a little bit of gratitude. Like, man, I was lucky to have my parents. I was lucky to have Neil and these people that were really rooting for me and pushing for me. And
right, because a lot of these kids didn't even have that.
Not at all. And anyone that was in their life was just abusive in the worst ways possible. And so it was an interesting experience. I think it does make you a little jaded if you work there for a while. I only worked there for a couple of years, but I knew people that worked there for a while, and they are the salt of the earth. Yes. I mean, there were dudes that worked there for 10, 15, 20 years, and I don't know how they, did it, because they were just solid people, very, I was.
Takes a special type of person
to do it that long.
That work.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from there, I went to the special education, which is Camelot. I don't know if you've ever heard of Camelot.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
I worked at Camelot. So I was working full-time at Camelot, and then I was part-time still at Indian Oaks. But overall, between mental health and special education, which kind of merged anyway.
Yeah.
It was a little under 8 years, working in both of those.
Okay. Where's is Camelot in Kankakee, or is that?
Yeah, Camelot is. It moved, I think, and it's now owned by a new company. I haven't been there a long time, 5-6 years now. But it moved to over by Wilmington somewhere. I forget.
Okay. I haven't heard about it in a long time until you brought it up. So
yeah. And then they got bought out by another company. And now the old building there, because they were in the old Kroger when I worked there.
That's what it was.
And now I think there's a school called Menta there, which is a similar kind of different, but similar in that it's an alternative school that kind of helps with when districts kind of having a hard time with, meeting the needs, kind of like a tier up from the district's special education program. So, work there. And again, you meet the best people, still some of my best friends that I work with to this day. I hang out with every week with one of the guys I used to work there almost every week. And one of my best friend lives down in Bloomington. I go down and see, it's some of the best relationships, best people I worked with at those two places. And so it was a good experience. It was a growing experience. You learn a lot about yourself, which was truthfully, helpful to me. I used to teach a social skills curriculum, and, you're giving all these things. You're like, I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I can incorporate some of this advice into my own life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just so cool to hear, where you started in Queens and the issues you were having, and then how, Neil came into your life and that school, and that just really put you in such a great place. And then here you are, you're doing the work that Neil was doing, the work that you were shown, and it's just incredible to see that, take shape. Where does Let's Catch Up? I know Let's Catch Up, the organization, is only a few years old, but my guess is that you've had this idea maybe for a while.
So yes and no. So really what it came back to is that in my mind, I always thought I like working in mental health and where I'm working because it's my job, but I also feel like I'm giving back. My job is kind of a value add to the community.
Are you still working in special education?
No.
Then?
So that's part of why Let's Catch Up came in, is that I left for a company called Applied Systems, which a lot of people probably know out this way.
Yep.
And now I work for a different
They're
company.
In University Park,
They just sold, but when I was working there, they were University Park. And then it's software for the insurance industry. And then I moved on to a different insurance, technology company from there. But there was a point at which I was like, all right, I left mental health, probably because for my own mental health a little bit.
I can't imagine, man. It's got to be hard for the people in that industry.
There was just a point, because I think I worked in a classroom at Camelot, and when I was there at Camelot, we were our goal was let's get you guys back to your district. Listen, you guys made some choices. Let's build some skills and let's get you back to your district because you don't want to be here. You know what I'm saying? It was that was the thing. It's you have a goal of getting there. Here's the steps to meet that goal. And it was cool because we were getting better and better at getting them back faster. And not in a get out of my school, but no, they build skills that would help them cope in a normal classroom. And, you know what I'm saying, to help them learn how to advocate for themselves and all those kinds of things that I think people just take for granted. And that a lot of times people really do struggle with that stuff. Those simple things are not, I
feel
easy.
Advocating for yourself is not something that comes natural to a lot of people, and including myself. It just doesn't come natural.
No. And especially if I don't know, if you're a student and you do this behavior and you get this result over and over again, and you kind of, and you wind up in a place like Camelot, you've been resistant in a way that now you're kind of dealing with the situation. I don't want to be here. I want to be back in my school. But the only way I do that is if I change some of these behaviors that I kind of ingrained in the process. And like you said, advocating for yourself when you've been able to work the system in some cases and get what you want. And it's not always bad. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And, they would come there, and I remember just they would get, and always in the beginning, they'd be like, I want to fight you. I want to blah, blah. And I would look at them listen, I've been doing this for a while. I was like, why don't we just skip the part where you like, I know you're a tough kid.
Yeah.
I do not want you to hit me. Yeah, please don't hit me.
We've made that clear.
Yeah, you're the toughest.
I'm not questioning you on whether you're tough or
struggle,
not.
But I was like, if we skip this month where you just test me, that's just one extra month that gets you back to your district faster. And eventually, like, once you build the culture in the classroom, like the other kids are like, yeah, they'll get you back. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure some of them probably didn't want to go back, though.
A lot.
Right?
Surprisingly, there was a stigma that a lot of them had, like, oh, I'm at this special school.
Okay.
So they all wanted to go back. And a lot of them I worked at, especially when I was in high school, a lot of them were athletes. They want to go play football and they wanted to.
Yeah, because there's none of that at Camelot.
Nah,
You're
and
not doing that.
Exactly. And so we would, long story short, it was like I got to a point where I remember we were good at getting kids out, but the more you get kids out, the more kids come in because you have at that point we had a waiting list. And I remember just being like, I am not passionate about this anymore. Like I was just kind of like, I want to help, but I'm kind of burnt out. So like this isn't a new challenge for me in like a positive way. This is like almost like a little bit of dread, like, oh, I gotta fight this fight again.
That's right. That's when you need to check yourself and be like, this isn't working for me anymore.
Yeah, because then I'm just going to be a robot. I'm not going to be helpful. And that's not going to be helpful to them. It's not going to be helpful for my mental health or anything like that. So,
well, good for you for realizing that because then it ends up being very detrimental to them.
Yeah.
To the students or even like your fellow, coworkers.
Sure. Yes.
They got to deal with that.
Yep.
So you end up getting out, like you said, you worked for Applied Systems. Now you work for another company that's similar. Now, Let's Catch Up was birthed out of probably seeing a lot of these kids go through like having school lunch debt, or was it talking to a lot of these other school officials from all these districts and just hearing about the lunch debt? What sparked it?
So number one, like I know this is going to sound lame or cheesy, but it was like I thought of myself as someone that was giving back to the community and had that value. Like that's important to me. And then I was at this new job and I just wasn't doing anything. So there was like this kind of like, this is what I say I am or think I am. And then this is my actions.
Right. You've had such a purpose for a long time.
Yeah. And it was just part of my job. I just wake up and like, this is what I do. And then you almost like, oh wait, I'm not doing anything to make any substantive change to the community or help out or anything like that. And I just was kind of feeling like a little bit of a hypocrite, to be honest. Like this is the way I think I am, but these are my actions. And so there was this kind of chasm. And so really the idea was like, I want to give back. I want to do something. And so given my history and my experience working at Camelot and seeing kids that went without and how that affected them, we had kids, because at Camelot, we had some extra stuff, a little extra resources. So we had kids come in from the weekend that wouldn't eat over the weekend, and they would just eat like 10 granola bars as soon as they came.
Oh my gosh.
They were genuine. They're growing kids and they're genuinely hungry. It's like, yeah, eat as many, it's going to help you behave and whatever, like eat as much. And so seeing that, for me, obviously almost all of our board, my wife's a special ed teacher at Allen Shepherd. I met her at Camelot. All of our board has worked with youth in some form or fashion. Almost all of our board has seen those scenarios. So we wanted to do something in the realm of providing resources, particularly food for kids and families in the community. And that's really like the rough idea. Like it wasn't like high level, like let's sit down and, come up with this grant. It was like, no, like we want to do some good things. Let me get my knucklehead friends with me to help out and my wife to wrangle all of us. And, just try and think of some things that we could do. Because in the beginning, we have no experience at all. We don't know what we're doing, and we just want to do good. And so we're like, all right, what's an easy starter model that we can kind of just jump into? Because we all work full-time jobs, none of us get paid. It's all volunteer board and advisory council that we have, and so it became one of those things where it was like, we need to think of something that is fairly straightforward, but we can be passionate about and actually make a sizable change. And so the first thing I thought of was, I don't know if you remember Nick Huffman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So local legend. Yeah.
Local legend. And he was one of the earlier guests on the podcast.
Oh, really?
So yeah. I think he was episode 13 or something like that.
Okay.
So very, very early on.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. He's actually the most listened to episode of. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah. So I remember he did this whole drive for student lunch in Bradley because he was like, I can't believe that these kids have student lunch then.
Yes, I remember when he started doing that.
I genuinely remember in that moment, like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right. I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, there's that much school lunch debt?
Thing? What the heck? And so, so that's kind of like, I was like, well, why don't we do that? It's pretty straightforward. We raise money. We get this 501c3 together. We create incentives for businesses and other people to give us money so they can get the tax advantage that they should. That's why it's there. And then we'll just raise money and just start giving money to school districts to pay off the lunch debt of the students and the families that need it most. So it's like a very simple model. But we said in our first board meeting that that's not where we want to stop. But we didn't have the experience, any of that to really know how to take any extra steps to get food home to families. Because that's
you got to start somewhere.
Yes. And so like, all right, we can pay the bill of their school lunch debt. We can give it to a trusted institution. We could know it be applied to the students that we want. There's not a ton of overhead there. We don't have to have all these expenses or anything like that. We can just do this thing. And so it started there. And luckily for me, my wife's a teacher and her assistant superintendent really liked her. So they, the assistant superintendent at Bradley Elementary, BSD 53, and I think Dennis is his name. So Jim Duggan and Dennis sat down with us and they kind of just told us the high level, like this is what's going on. And so COVID monies were done. That was the first year. And so the student lunch debt stuff was kind of rearing its ugly head again. And so one of the craziest things, and I think a lot of people are like, well, why are you paying off student lunch debt? Like you're paying off free and reduced. Like I thought this was free. And so like one of the things that they told me is that you can qualify for free, but maybe not know you qualify for free. And when you do your initial registration, maybe you miss that part. And so you have families. And so like, if you're on free, you make zero, as a family of four, you make like between $0 and $30-something thousand each.
Okay.
So we're talking sincerely, like seriously low income. And then I think reduce is the next one up. So it's 30 to 50. So like, that was our target. So when we were talking with Jim and Dennis, they were like, we have $7,000 in debt just in that. And the reason being is if you miss a deadline, the ISB deadline, you're on the hook for those lunches until the next deadline. So the idea is some people get signed up, whatever, but my thought process is like, that's what we want to target. So our first one was like, all right, let's see what we're made of. And because the community is awesome and we worked hard, but really Kankakee County, if you're supporting Kankakee County is about you.
Yes, exactly. 100%. I've always said that. You know, if you're genuine, people will support you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%. And so we were able, I think in our first, I think by June, we raised $7,000 and we just gave them $7,000. Like give that to those families. And that was cool. Like we were like, all right, we kind of did something. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like we made the difference. We worked really hard. We were all really stressed and running around like we're
and that first one you'll never forget.
Never.
But you've done, oh my gosh, you've done countless since then.
So I think we're close to 34 now.
That's amazing. In just 2 years.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of it. Like we're pumped about it, man. That's pretty cool. I feel like a lot of families.
I mean, it's sad that there's been that many, but it's also just that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's 34 different like checks.
Well, not 34. $34,000. So
$34,000. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I
thought you were talking.
We're almost through all the districts in Kankakee County that still have debt because sometimes they qualify for what's called the community eligibility CEP provision, which is if you have enough students on free and reduced, which is just a poverty proxy, like 62, I think it's like 62.5%, it's totally random, or above of your students, then ISB will come in and pay off all of the lunch debt for your whole district. So if you have this much poverty in your district, then they'll pay off all of it.
Okay. But the districts that don't qualify for that.
And then there's still districts like Bradley Elementary that they still had $9,000 from previous debt.
Yeah.
Right. So we were able to pay off some of that. And
And I don't even know if is Bradley even considered a poverty?
I wouldn't consider it, but they qualify for CEP. Okay. So I think there's enough poverty in the district where the ISB, they cross that threshold where ISB will pay for it. I again, fact check, whatever, right. Sure. Jamie, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. So I don't, so that's kind of the world, because a lot of people have questions about that. Like, what are you doing? Like, why, how it's free? Like, what are you paying off? And then my thought process too is like, we definitely do not want to pay off. And no offense to people that make extra money. We're not trying to pay off people that have, making six figures.
No.
You know what I'm saying? And that's it's means tested. We don't have all the money in the world. Resources go to the people that need it most.
No. And so to avoid that, are you looking at like each student individually and figuring out like,
no, so we ask the district for a bunch of data, usually is what we do. So how much is in your free, how much is in your reduced? And then ultimately we do trust the districts in that we just want this applied to the kids that need it most. Because even if you don't qualify for free, and I think it's like the cutoff for reduced, excuse me. So you're a family of four and you're making $53,000 or $54,000 a year. Like you got other bills that are more important. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe we can help out. You know what I'm saying? So if you're in that next, tier of income, you still probably need a little extra support. And if we can help in that way to kind of alleviate your kid's lunch bill at school, so they don't have to feel a certain way, or there's not these constant letters going home. Like that's the goal. That's the whole point. And so,
so it's confidential. We
don't want to know really. Okay. Like we don't want, that's part of our care closet stuff too. We give it to district partners. We have liaisons of the district and we just give resources.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So that's kind of been the next step from paying off the debt, is having these care closets in the districts.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so care closet is just kind of a blanket term for, sometimes it's literally just, school districts don't always have a lot of extra space, so it's literally a closet. Like, it's not like this fancy, whatever. It's like, here's the closet where I can put these totes full of supplies, so when I need them, I can give them to kids. So we call them care closets. I think that's like the more, I think someone on YouTube popularized the care closet. So I think that's the term that we use. School districts call it different things, but it's essentially like a resource depository. And, that was my wife's idea, because we kept thinking like, how are we going to get, because we wanted to get to that next stage and we were getting some more funding. And we were doing some good fundraising, and we're like, we can do the school lunch that stuff still, but this goal that we thought was 2-3 years down the road, we can actually meet that goal a lot faster. And so my wife was like, we could do care closet stuff. Like we could sponsor care closets in the districts. And I was like, that's a great idea. And so we already had, as we give these checks, we kind of build a relationship in the district.
Sure.
So we kind of got key contacts in each district. And really we try and provide non-perishable foods, hygiene items, and like clothing items. Now, we send out, like our last one, we sent out a survey. And then what we tried to do is the things that were asked the most by the districts, right? So like, I think it was 7 districts. And so like deodorant was asked by all districts, and, snacks of some sort were asked for all districts. And there was like a couple other things that had, like, in terms of count, 7 districts had, if it was like over 3 or 4 across districts, we went to a bulk supplier and we bought just as much as we could. You know what I'm saying?
Because it gets to a point you're like, okay, we need like, 1,000 or like thousands of sticks of deodorant.
1,400 pairs of socks. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And here's the thing is you save a lot of money. So if we try and really keep our expenses as low as possible. And then also like if like it's weird, I'm a little neurotic. I think our whole board feels this way. If people are going to give you their hard-earned money, you better stretch it. Like it's like you do not play around with other people's money. They are trusting you. And that's such a huge, we just got to,
it's a kind of a burden to carry, but like in a good way.
No. It's on net. It's great for the community, and it's good for us because it keeps us focused and honed in. When someone gives you a big check, you're just like, all right, like we got to get to work, and we got to make sure that
bar gets set pretty high.
You're like, all right, and so and so yes, with the care closets, that was our way of saying, hey man, we can get resources whether at school or if a social worker or a teacher wants to put it in their backpack, we can get it home to them over the weekend, which is stuff that we did at Camelot from time to time. Kids that we knew, and sometimes we'd have to hide it in their backpack because, family members would take it, you know what I'm saying? So that, because they were the smallest kid. And so they would that's the circumstance.
Yeah.
And so we were like, hey man, because my wife's a teacher and I saw this with teachers, even at Camelot and teachers I knew, they buy that stuff themselves. Like the best people ever. And so you have these teachers that are literally buying this stuff with the salaries that, in my opinion, they're underpaid.
Right. They're buying this stuff for their classrooms or for their students.
Because every day you see this kid come in with holy socks or, you know what I'm saying, the same sweatpants or whatever. So they're good people and they actually buy this stuff. So like, again, we're not going to be able to get everything, but maybe we can, same thing with student lunch. Maybe we won't pay off all of it, but we can kind of plug that gap a little bit. And so, again, we're growing that, and it's really a shift for us as an organization to really grow that and to make that more substantial because, if you give to one school, we have a contact at each school, and then the idea is to spread it if there's enough, right? So like our goal is let's keep growing that so that they have so much, they need to give it to the other schools in the district. And so it was the Kankakee school that we did it with. Michelle Dollars, she's the assistant principal at the junior high. I forget, there's so many. It's like
I would imagine you're talking to all these different schools and all these different districts.
And so, but
the lines kind of blur after a while.
Yes. And so we got, because Kankakee has so many students as a district, the way we budgeted was like, if you have this many student threshold, you got this much. And if you got this, so like, but we still tried to give, because the rural schools don't get as much notice or, you know what I'm saying? So there's not as much resources so we tried to up those a little bit because we know they're not getting maybe as much as the Bourbonnais schools or the Kankakee schools, but just given the sheer number of students and the need in Kankakee, even if other people are helping, like we know that there's still going to be a need.
Yes.
And so it was cool because she and the principal, I forget her name, but her and the head principal were like so appreciative. And then within like a month, they had boxed all the stuff up and they had dispersed it to all the other schools. And like, that's the model. That's what we wanted. And it was like, she like took pictures and it was like, oh man, our vision's kind of coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And so like, it wasn't like an insurmountable amount of stuff, but I was like, there was a decent amount of stuff that went to each school. And, if we can just keep growing that, we can keep, meeting that need. There's like
right. Cause there's only so much you and your team at Let's Ketchup can do.
Yeah. But we're growing exponentially. So it's like, my thing is like, let's just rock. Let's just keep, making this a reality and just kind of riding that momentum, because like, we did the deliveries and it was like, this isn't going to, stop, food scarcity but it was sizable for us, like enough where we were like, oh, this is cool. Cause we did one the previous year and it was way smaller. And then this one was like triple the size or, 3 or 4 times the size in terms of the amount of stuff.
Wow.
And I was like, this is cool. If we can just keep doing that, which is eventually it's going to, it's going to
plateau.
Yeah. But
I mean, hopefully, right. You don't want that's the goal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You want this to end or at least get better, lower.
Yes.
To where you don't have to be providing these things as much.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. But while the need's here, we want to grow it until the need is at least somewhat met. But if you look at Feed America, there's like a $4 million like food scarcity shortfall. So like they would do like a yearly, I think it's like, that's what the number is. So it's like, it would take $4 million. So there's all these organizations working on food scarcity, but that's because it's a big problem. And I remember we met with the Northern Illinois Food Bank, one of the people up there, and they were just sharing all this data about like food deserts in Kankakee County, Hopkins, Pembroke. They would consider Momence, Essex, all these rural communities that no one really thinks about, where there's all of these kind of older folks and all these kinds of things, and people that are in dire situations, especially in the cold, and they don't have the resources they need. There's still a lot of need in terms of food scarcity, and 16% of children in Kankakee County suffer from some semblance of food scarcity.
Wow.
And even just the mission of, I can't think of the name, Tim Zidek, and they build beds.
Sleep in Heavenly Peace.
Yeah, just the fact that there's a never-ending backlog of kids that need beds.
Yes.
Like, it's like you get into this field and you're like, man, there's a lot of kids that don't have. And you're like, there's a lot more we can do. And that's kind of how we're approaching it. You know what I mean? We're like, let's just keep going. And hopefully things change in a way that, like hopefully the Illinois state government ends up paying for student lunch then.
Yeah.
And then we could say, okay, all of our resources now are going to go towards, that'd be like, like a blessing. You know what I'm saying? Like
towards other things.
Yeah. So that we can say, okay, well, they're handling that. So let's go let's get the food home, or let's get the resources or the clothes or whatever.
Right. So what can people do to help then, or if they want to get involved with Let's Ketchup? So
I would say, obviously, like, and this is, let me start with just the base level, share our stuff, like our stuff. And just from an algorithmic standpoint, like it just gets more notoriety and gets more eyes on it. Part of what our mission isn't just to provide food, but it's also to be somewhat of an information repository. So share our stuff, let people know about the need. If you don't want to give to Let's Catch Up to cancel student lunch debt, you can go to your district and pay off student lunch debt. Does not have to go. That's probably the worst thing to say, but I don't care. Like, you don't have to necessarily go through us. But if you want to, go to our website and there's a donate button. Please do. No, but I'm seriously, like, it's one of those things where, we want to solve this problem. But yeah, to get involved, I would say like and share our stuff, like our page. That's huge. Just getting our name out there.
I would imagine you got to be looking for more volunteers too, right?
Yes. So the volunteer stuff. So we do have a monthly mobile food pantry in Pembroke Township. That, are one of our board members used to work at Urban Farmer and now he works at our home, but he knew one of the reps at Feed America because they would donate a lot and put us in contact with them. And I was like, hey, we talked with the lady and she's like, Kankakee Bradley, they have actually a lot of resources. She goes, we're really trying to target, Hopkins, Pembroke, all of these kind of food deserts in the rural community. And again, this is where it's like, what can we do to fill a gap? So we have a monthly food pantry that we're always looking for volunteers. We have like a group chat and Messenger, and every month, like 2 weeks out, I'm like, hey guys, who's coming this week? And we usually have way more than enough, but if you want to, please reach out because we always need volunteers for that. And just, like I said, like and share, donate if you can or you want to. Or reach out because there's always opportunities. I don't know if we have consistent in terms of like volunteering for obviously we'll have events and different things like that. But outside of that, there's not as of right now, obviously we have plans.
Right. Yeah, at this point. But, you look for, I think Let's Catch Up is on Facebook. Are you on Instagram as well? I can't remember.
Facebook, Instagram, and it's spelled ketchup, like Heinz ketchup, Let's Catch Up.
Yes. Should put that out there. Yeah.
And then LinkedIn as well. Trying to think. Yeah. And then obviously if you go to Let's Catch Up, if you just Google Let's Catch Up, .com or .org, it'll pop up. But yeah, so a lot of our missions and what we're doing is kind of showing on there too. And so growing and learning as we go.
Well, Mike, thank you for the work that you and everyone else at Let's Catch Up is doing. It's so important. And I feel like, it's something that is much needed and something that, everyday people in Kankakee County don't necessarily have maybe the time to really find out, oh, wow, this is like a major need and you're helping take care of that. So, so thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to add?
No, just that I just genuinely appreciate Kankakee County for supporting us and having our back, kind of this grassroots, group of friends that just want to make a difference. And I feel like at every turn, there's a new opportunity or someone else trying to support us or, help us get the word out or all these kinds of things. And we just kind of just keep pushing forward. So just a thank you to Kankakee County, maybe be the last thing I'd want to say. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
That concludes this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Teague Dreenan for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.
This river